Welcome back to the channel. I'm Damien Broderick, and today we're going to debunk some of these menswear rules. So these menswear rules, it's always important to remember that these rules were never actually in fact rules. They were merely guidelines told to men who had very little clue, or frankly just gave zero fucks about personal style, only really ever wore a suit for a must and never ever for a want. They were simply to save these men, time and effort, and reduce the risk of a so-called faux pas. If you look at some of the most stylish men of all time, every single one of them break these rules in the name of personal style. So let's jump right into the list with number one. And this is something that I get bombarded with in my Instagram comments, and that is that you must wear a belt with a suit. Another way that people phrase this to me is that if the trousers have belt loops, then you must wear a belt. And okay, here's the thing with a belt. If a belt is no longer functional, it becomes optional. If your trousers fit and the belt is not required to hold up the trousers, it is now a style accessory and therefore becomes completely optional. So just remember that little phrase, that if it's no longer functional, it becomes optional. It becomes a style choice, emphasis on the word choice. The presence of belt loops does not mean that a belt is required, the same way the presence of a collar on a shirt does not mean that a tie is required. It's just simply not a thing. The reason most trousers will come with belt loops is because off-the-rack clothing has to try its best to fit a wide range of bodies and shapes and sizes. For example, trousers normally jump in increments of 2 inches. For example, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40. If you happen to fall either side of one of these numbers, then your trousers are either too tight, slightly uncomfortable, so everyone generally sizes up. Therefore, the trousers become a little bit loose, and then that's when a belt may be required. Also keep in mind the impact retail has on these so-called rules. Teaching men that a belt is an absolute requirement is an added sale through the till. So most higher end suit stores will most likely offer an alteration rather than offer you another product. But there is in fact 2 actual rules when it comes to belts and suits. And that is, a belt should never ever be worn with a 3-piece. The waistcoat should sit completely flush with the waistband of the trousers, giving a clean, uninterrupted line. And the other rule is a belt should never ever be worn with black or white tie. Tuxedo trousers should never have belt loops. Most of them won't. The waistline should always be covered by either a waistcoat or a cummerbund. So the same rule applies, that the waistline should be uninterrupted and clean. And speaking of tuxedos, that brings us on to rule number 2. A watch should never be worn with black tie. So although this is a cute sentiment, it is honestly a load of garbage. It's nothing more than a sentiment. And that sentiment is that you shouldn't wear a watch with black tie because you shouldn't be aware or conscious of the time. It is a cute sentiment, but a sentiment nonetheless. Brands like Patek with the Calatrava or the Ellipse, brands like Jaeger Culture have the Master Ultra 10, and now the Reverso. We'll touch on why now in another video. And of course our arch nemesis Longines, they've been making specific watches for black tie. The first of its kind was introduced in 1917 by Cartier with the Tank, and that is not much long after the very first ever wristwatch was put into production. So literally from the very beginning of sartorial horology, a timepiece with black tie has always been a thing and will forever be a thing. This sentiment has also transcended down that a timepiece should not have a second hand, blah, blah, blah. If a rule or sentiment bends and changes to suit someone's agenda, it was simply never a rule to begin with. As I mentioned, these were guides for men that had little knowledge or frankly zero fucks, to make it much easier for them to just dress and not make really bad mistakes. So if a gentleman's only watch was a bulky steel sports watch, it's much easier to tell him to wear no watch or give him a reason why he shouldn't wear a watch rather than buy him a new one. And as mentioned, retail has an impact on these rules, and most decent suit shops won't sell a watch, and no watch shop will ever sell a suit. So unlike the belt, they're not looking to increase their UPT. That's retail jargon for units per transaction. That's exactly what's happening with the belt. Doesn't really happen with a watch, so they'll just make up some reason why you shouldn't actually wear one. Hence the sentiment, not a rule. Rule number 3 is blue and green should never be seen. So this obviously sticks with people because it rhymes, but it's nothing more than a rhyme. It's just a load of shit. Again, most likely came from a similar piece of advice from a retail assistant or a stylist that's giving the same men advice about black and brown or blue and black, that they also can't be worn together, when none of the above is actually true. The issue is just difficult because it all boils down to the hue. Not every shade of blue and every shade of green are harmonious, but that doesn't mean the two colors cannot be worn together. This is a color wheel. As a rule of thumb, colors directly across from each other are harmonious. This does not mean colors next to each other cannot be worn. They just need to be the right shades. Again, this is just an easy rule of thumb to follow before you kind of hone your skills on color matching or intentionally color clashing. Rule 4. A tie should hit your belt buckle, and the back blade must never be longer than the front. Again, this was just a simple guide to help men with their proportions and not have the tie look too short or too long. But if the trousers are high rise, then it's very difficult to get that tie hitting that so-called sweet spot. That's why we see some gentlemen throughout history and even today tuck the tie into the waistband of their trousers, or they intentionally break this rule and allow the back blade to be longer than the front, and sometimes even tuck that into the waistband of the trousers, and that allows the front blade of the tie to hit that so-called sweet spot and work on their proportions. It's why we see the term sprezzatura thrown around all the time. For those who don't know, it's essentially a word used for a sense of like nonchalant, being intentionally unkept, the art of being like undone. Dressing this way already communicates that you're trying quite hard in everyday society where someone just like throws on whatever they want. If you're dressing quote unquote well, you're communicating to people that you're applying effort. What we don't want is to scream, I'm trying really, really hard. It should always look effortless. Rule 5. No brown in town. So this was a rule as an attempt to divide the countryside from the city. The brown typically is associated with tweeds that are commonly worn for country sports like shooting and all that sort of stuff. While I don't think pinstripe has any business being on a shoot or out in the Highlands, a tweed jacket does not and will not look out of place in the city. Perhaps the boardroom is a little bit of a stretch, but as we covered in previous videos, the office space is far more casual than it's ever been. And if you work in tech, for example, you wear a tweed jacket to work, chances are you're going to be the most formal person in the office. In regards to footwear, it all depends on the shade of brown and not so much on the shoe. So for formal shoes, keep them dark, and for casual ones, a little less. There's a little bit of flexibility there. I would be careful when wearing brown shoes with a full matching suit. For example, the blue suit and tan shoes combination is one that we would all rather forget. But if they are a dark brown like a dark chocolate brown shoe, they will work absolutely great with a grey flannel. If it's a formal classic navy suit, I would probably stick with black. It's just safer. Not that brown would be incorrect, just personal preference, but keep the brown dark. And number 6 can be a bonus rule. Don't mix patterns. Dressing stylish and intentional pattern clashing is much more of a tonal and scale matter rather than the patterns themselves. Like we touched on the pinstripe suit video, which I'll link up here if you want to watch it. When it comes to wearing striped shirts or a striped tie, the scale and the tone is really important so you don't come across looking very stripy. So reverting back to rule 3 regarding color matching, this method is also put into practice here. If the colors are harmonious and the overall outfit is balanced and well fitted, chances are most people won't even notice the pattern clashing. As mentioned, it needs to be absolutely intentional. Scale, tone, color are all very important here. So this image of Edward VIII, for example, he's wearing 4 different patterns in this one outfit. So I hope you know now that most of these rules are complete nonsense, and they were only ever used to give men, and excuse me for sounding like a parrot, but men with little knowledge or little fucks to give regarding style or men's fashion. If you have any more of these rules, or you've heard of one and you thought it was ridiculous, or maybe you heard of one and you thought that actually makes a little bit of sense, let me know below in the comments. Remember to hit that subscribe button, and if you like this video, hit the like button. It really does help these videos and this channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then, stay sharp. Eat fucking shit, get wrecked, blah blah. To ensure that the front is colors directly across. That is the loudest truck. I bet his dick is huge.